So Simple tutorial. Good morning, students. Welcome to SST So Simple tutorial. I hope you are well. In the previous class, we had discussed the events that took place in Soviet Union from the ascendancy of Mikhail Gorbachev till disintegration of the Soviet Union. Today, we will discuss the causes of the disintegration of Soviet Union. How did the second most powerful country in the world suddenly disintegrate? Students, no single reason can be attributed as the cause of disintegration. Let us discuss them one by one. First, economic failures. There is no doubt that there were internal weaknesses of the economic institutions. Students, there was an emphasis on the heavy industries, as a result of which the Soviet economy failed to meet the expectations of the people, especially in terms of food and consumer goods. The management and control of agriculture and industry was in the hands of state officials. People's standard of living was far below the standard of living of people of the advanced countries in the West. Next, militarization. To make herself militarily strong and to compete with the US, the Soviet Union spent a large portion of its resources in the manufacture of weapons. Initially, only the United States possessed the atomic weapons, but in 1949, the Soviet Union exploded the atom bomb and thus began the arms race. Thus, in order to match the military might of the US, Soviet economy was consuming much of its resources in maintaining a nuclear and military arsenal. Besides, Soviet Union was also bearing the cost of development and maintenance of its satellite states in the East European countries. Soviet leaders forgot that they did not have so much resources as US and other Western nations possessed. This led to a huge economic burden that the system could not cope with. So, because of the militarization, shortages occurred in respect of basic necessities like tea, butter, meat, shoes, toothpaste, clothes, etc. Next, comparison of Soviet Union with Western nations. With the growth of information technology and means of communication, people gained access to all information about the Western nations. They became aware of the economic advancement of the West. They could see the disparities between their system and the systems of the West. They found out what grand facilities in respect of housing, schools, arts and entertainment were available to the people in Western countries. When they compared their political and economic system with the Western nations, they got shocked because they had grown up listening that the Soviet system was better than the Western capitalism. Understood? Next, political and administrative stagnation. The Soviet Union had become stagnant in the administrative and political sense as well. The Communist Party that had ruled the Soviet Union for over 70 years had turned authoritarian and was not accountable to the people. Party bureaucrats gained more privileges than ordinary people. There was widespread corruption and lack of transparency. People did not have the freedom of speech. Political activities were not tolerated. They were afraid of the secret police. They could not protest. Then who would change the system? They lost their hopes. As a result, people identified themselves neither with the system nor with the rulers, and so the government lost popular support. Next, role of Gorbachev. This is very important. Dear students, there were problems in Soviet Union. Gorbachev diagnosed the problem correctly and tried to rectify them through his reforms. But when Gorbachev carried out his reforms, he unleashed such forces that were virtually impossible to control, and that ultimately led to the disintegration of the Soviet Union. Dear students, a sort of an unholy alliance existed between the incapable, corrupt officials and incompetent people working in factories. And these people wanted to continue their activities in the way they were doing them before. So when Gorbachev launched his programs, the corrupt officials opposed it. There was also a section of bureaucrats and communist hardliners who did not want to adopt these policies. They felt that their power, privileges, and luxury would reduce if restructuring and openness were brought into the system. On the other hand, there were common people who were becoming impatient for the openness and the restructuring of system. They wanted these reforms to be implemented faster than it was scheduled to be. They wanted to catch up with the West quickly. So they became disappointed when they felt that they were not benefiting from the reforms as they had hoped. Gorbachev was thus caught between two groups demanding different types of action. One section of the society did not want the reforms and the other wanted it to move fast. In this tug of war of divided opinion, Gorbachev lost support on all sides. Understood. Next, rise of nationalism among various republics. Dear students, we have read that the satellite states in Eastern Europe based on Soviet model were all overthrown by popular revolutions. This opened a Pandora box of nationalistic expectations within the Soviet Union itself. The rise of nationalism and the desire for sovereignty in Baltic republics, Ukraine, Georgia, including Russia, proved to be the final and most immediate cause for the disintegration of the USSR. See, the Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia had been independent states between the two world wars and were annexed by the USSR in June 1940. These states had always maintained their stand that they were forcibly annexed and hence their annexation into the Soviet Union was illegal. They believed that the merger was the result of some secret pact between Stalin and Hitler. They had also perceived themselves to be more a part of Europe than of Russia. So nationalist sentiments were there. Gorbachev's reforms just acted as a catalyst. It speeded up and increased nationalist dissatisfaction to the point that the governments and rulers could not control it. Next, desire to get rid of backward Central Asian states. Dear students, during the Cold War, it was thought that given the ethnic and religious differences in the Central Asian republics with the Soviet Union and their economic backwardness, nationalist unrest would be more there. But what actually came out was different. Nationalist dissatisfaction with the Soviet Union was found to be more in European and prosperous part, in Baltic states as well as in Ukraine and Georgia. Ordinary people among these prosperous republics did not want to pay the price to uplift the backward Central Asian republics. Understood? Let us now see the consequences of disintegration of the USSR. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the socialist systems in the Eastern Europe had profound consequences for world politics. We will put them mainly under three heads. First of all, it meant the end of Cold War confrontations. Dear students, the world had become so used to the Cold War politics for about 4 decades that when it suddenly ended, the people could hardly believe that the world was a different place now. The disintegration of USSR students meant the fall of the Second World. It also meant the end of the ideological conflict. The dispute over whether the capitalist system was better or the communist system was better and which system would dominate the world was not an issue anymore. Since the Cold War had also led to the arms race between the superpowers, the end of Cold War had also led to the end of arms race. People could expect peace in the world. Secondly, disintegration of the USSR also changed the power relations in world politics. It resulted a change in the balance of power. The end of the Cold War paved possibility of dominance either by the only left superpower America or by a group of countries where no power will dominate. That means the bipolarity was to be replaced by either a unipolar world or a multipolar world. As the events turned out, finally the US became the sole superpower. There was no power left to challenge the supremacy of the US acquired an effective role in commanding and controlling the world politics. Financial institutions like the World Bank, IMF, or even the WTO are being used by the USA and other developed countries to implement policies to suit their interests. Their decisions have increased the miseries of the weak and poor nations. Even the UNO and the Security Council have come under the sway of the USA. The capitalist economy is now the dominant economic system, and the liberal democracy has emerged as the dominant political system internationally. Third, the emergence of many new countries. The republics that separated from the Soviet Union became the members of the United Nations. This naturally led to an increase in the number of members of this world body. All these countries had their own independent aspirations and choices. Some of them, especially the Baltic and East European states, wanted to join the European Union and become a part of the NATO. For example, Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland have all joined European Union. These Central Asian countries wanted to take advantage of their geographical location and continue their ties with Russia and also establish ties with the West, the US, the China and others. These are in general the consequence of the disintegration of the USSR. Before we close the lesson, let us quickly recap the lesson. Causes of disintegration. First, economic failures. Soviet economy failed to meet the expectations of the people. Soviet Union was putting more emphasis on heavy industries that led to the shortage of consumer goods. Second, militarization. Soviet Union was spending much of its resources in maintaining a nuclear and military arsenal. It was also using its resources in maintaining its satellite states in East European countries. Third, comparison of Soviet Union with Western nations. When people became aware of the economic advancement of the West, they understood the reality that how backward they were. They were shocked. Fourth, political and administrative stagnation. The Communist Party that had ruled the Soviet Union for more than 70 years had turned authoritarian. It was not accountable to the people. There was widespread corruption and lack of transparency. People lacked freedom. They wanted a change in the system. Fifth, role of Gorbachev. Gorbachev's reforms actually destabilized the communist control over Soviet Union. Glasnost changed the citizens' opinion of the existing authoritarian control and dysfunctional system so strongly that it declined the credibility and legitimacy of party. On the other hand, reforms were opposed by the leaders within the Communist Party. Sixth, rise of nationalism among various republics. Glasnost had led to the rise of nationalism and desire for sovereignty within various republics, including Russia and the Baltic republics. And last point, desire to get rid of backward Central Asian states. Lastly, people from the prosperous parts also did not want to continue with the backward Central Asian states. So all these reasons, students, were collectively responsible for the disintegration of USSR. Now, let us see the important points, consequences of disintegration. 1. The end of Cold War confrontations. 2. End of polarity and the supremacy of the USA. And third, emergence of many new countries. I hope you have understood the topic properly. Now we go through your textbook at least once. You will definitely develop a better understanding of the topic. In the next class, we will discuss the next topic, shock therapy. Till then, keep reading and have a nice time. Thank you.